Bill Cosby has been released from prison after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his sexual assault conviction. The actor and comedian served almost 3 years behind bars before being freed yesterday. State Supreme Court judges says that he shouldn't have faced charges in the first place because of a non-prosecution agreement with a former district attorney. Well, that former Montgomery County District Attorney is Bruce Castor, and he is with us now. All right, Bruce, thank you so much for joining us again. I worked for a very long time for KYW in Philadelphia, and I probably interviewed you a couple of times. So, but this is an entirely different circumstance, and you find yourself at the center of this conversation again. As people look back at this non-prosecution agreement that you made with Bill Cosby. So I want to ask you, as you kind of think about this non-prosecution agreement again, do you have any regrets about not just the non-prosecution agreement, but it also wasn't put in writing. It wasn't disclosed that in exchange for this deposition, there was going to be a non-prosecution agreement specifically. I know hindsight is 20/20. How do you feel about the decisions that you made?
Well, I made the correct decisions at the time, and they still hold up today. I mean, I put in writing that he wasn't going to be prosecuted. As a direct result of that not being prosecuted, he loses his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination automatically. So there doesn't have to be any agreement with him. It's simply, you're not going to get prosecuted. Now you must sit for a deposition and you must answer questions without claiming Fifth Amendment privilege. So the part that I had to do, which was make a decision that I thought was binding on the Commonwealth, I made, and I made that in writing. If further evidence is necessary, that would have been up to Cosby's people to do, not to me.
And I know that it's a different time right now, but in light of the whole sort of Me Too movement, there's been a lot of pushback when it comes to things like non-disclosure agreements. And what had happened here was the deposition was sealed. Once it was unsealed, we saw that though he admitted to purchasing Quaaludes for women that he wanted to have sex with, he never actually admitted to any particular crime. Do you think for the trade-off that you made, you got enough from Bill Cosby?
Well, you have to look at it from the perspective of 2005 and compare the evidence then to the evidence now. The case hasn't gotten any better since I had it in 2005. There wasn't enough evidence to win the case. In fact, the prosecutors couldn't win the case with the deposition and with one other alleged victim the first time. And the Supreme Court made it clear that it wasn't going to allow all those other potential victims to testify. So what does the prosecution have today that it didn't have, that I didn't have? And that's the deposition evidence. So they needed that in order to arrest and convict him. So they wouldn't have that had I not agreed to to forego prosecuting him, because that's what was the trigger for forcing him to testify. So they would have been right back to where I was in 2005 without enough evidence to win the case. So I thought getting some measure of punishment for Cosby was better than getting no measure of punishment for Cosby.
So and this cost you a lot. I mean, you lost your election, and this was kind of the primary argument, right? When you found out that they were going ahead with the criminal case against Bill Cosby, knowing the agreement that you made, and that agreement was sort of, I guess, being tossed out, what was your reaction? Did you anticipate that things would come to this? Did you expect that the trial would go through and there would have been a conviction?
Well, I learned that that the DA's office was looking at the case again in September of 2015 before anything was used in the campaign or anything. And I wrote a private memo to the district attorney's office explaining and reminding them what happened 11 years before or 10 years before. And I expected that they would use that and realize that at the very least, the deposition couldn't be used, and I thought that they couldn't arrest Cosby. It never actually crossed my mind that they would go ahead and arrest him anyway and put the county through 2 trials and that expense and all of this effort and now binding decision on prosecutors from now to the end of time out of the Supreme Court that's negative for them. I didn't expect that they would do that. I also didn't expect Kevin Steele to use it as an election ploy. And I realized that once he had made it the centerpiece of his election, he had married himself to arresting Cosby. And here's the result. All those dominoes fell, and a very bad decision for the government came out yesterday.
You had mentioned that part of the reason you wanted to get the deposition is to at least give the victim in this case, Ms. Constant, something for a civil trial. I guess my next question is, that's not really your area of concern, right? If it's not going to be a criminal prosecution, then why did you care to do that, to make that step?
Well, once I decided that there wasn't enough evidence that I thought the case could produce a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt, I had 2 choices. I could do nothing and hope it got better, in which case I was essentially hoping for a confession because that would be the only way it could have gotten better. Or I could set the pieces up so that civil lawyers who knew what they were doing would know how to achieve a victory in civil court that would punish Cosby. You're right; it isn't my area, and it's not my job to do the civil case for the victim's lawyers. But it is part of my job as a minister of justice in Pennsylvania to do my best to achieve a just end. So what I did is I set the pieces up on the board so that they could be used, if they were used correctly, in such a way as to leverage a good settlement for the victim. And that is, in fact, what happened. And I was happy with that result and thought that I had helped achieve a just end.
Let me ask you another question, Mr. Castor, about sort of the twists and turns of this case, because, after the agreement that you made and the deposition is there and it is sealed and the deposition becomes part of a civil suit and the outcome of that civil suit is sealed. But the reason we know about the contents of that deposition is because the civil suit was unsealed at the request of the Associated Press, and it had to do with Bill Cosby's public persona, public criticism of kind of behavior within the African American community, and he become what the judge said that he was moralizing, and so the judge unsealed the deposition. I'm curious, and then it was resealed, but I'm curious about your legal take on that move. Should that deposition have been unsealed?
No. Part of the negotiation for the settlement of the case was both sides were negotiating what they would get. And in exchange, I'm sorry, the phones are going crazy here.
That's okay. You're a wanted man.
Except for the issue of having to pay a lot of money, Cosby wanted to get something in return, and presumably what he wanted was to have all these things sealed. And the parties in the civil case came to a negotiated resolution that was signed off on by a judge. So it's like a contract. So the judge, when he's asked to unseal it, is asking to go back in time and overturn what the parties in a civil contract had agreed to. And ultimately, when the judge unsealed the civil case, Cosby appealed that, and the appellate court ruled that the trial judge was wrong and should not have unsealed it. And as you point out, it was resealed. But by then, it's too late, and the barn door is open and the horse has gotten out.
Mm-hmm. So we've been sort of talking about all this legal maneuvering, but at the center of this are, quite a number of women who, who say they are victims and feel like they have gotten nothing out of this experience. So earlier on CBS This Morning, one of the women who accused Cosby of sexual assault, her lawyer, Gloria Allred, responded to the court's decision to release Cosby. I want to play what she had to say.
It's almost like a mantra for me that he was released on a legal technicality and not because he's innocent. He is not innocent. He'll never be innocent, and I need to hold on to that.
So what would justice look like to you now? Because he is claiming that he is innocent. He is claiming that justice has been served.
He's going to always claim he was innocent. That story has never changed. But the 60 plus women that have come forward, we all know the truth. So his legacy, will never be what it used to be. So a little bit of justice served there. He did serve 2 years, a little bit of justice in the fact that he is a disgraced former America's dad. And I can live with that.
So is this the end of the road for, these women who say that they are his victims? Do they have any recourse at this point, or is this the end of the story?
I think attitudes have changed over time about going to the police and reporting crimes, but it has always been the case in Pennsylvania and throughout the United States that we have a right of confrontation in a criminal matter. And if people are victimized by powerful men, they need to go to the police and make police reports. This notion that after the fact you can come in and claim that you were also victimized when it's too late for a defense to be mounted and it's too late for a prosecutor to bring a charge is antithetical to what the American Constitution stands for and the right of confrontation. Now, fortunately, I think attitudes have changed and people do come forward. But right now, anybody who was victimized, 10, 20, 30 years ago, as far as I know, doesn't have any recourse in the criminal
law. Bruce Castor, I thank you for joining us. You're sort of in the hot seat right now, and so I appreciate you taking time out to talk to us.
Thank you for having me.